thank you for joining us on this next panel, which is going to be as exciting, if not more, compared to the one on audits, security audits, and frustrations, which seem to be the category there. So we have a fantastic lineup of people joining us who should know a little bit about vulnerabilities and exploits. I'm just kidding. I mean, these are the people who've been building tools and techniques. You just heard from Yannis, some very deep program analysis tools. We'll go around the introductions. So we have Tintin Webb from Consensus Diligence. We have Yannis from DDoB. We have Christoph from himself. And we have Anton from Chain Security. And of course, we have Mudit from Polygon. So I would request to go around and take your time, introduce yourselves, your projects, the reason, all the relevant points from a vulnerabilities and exploit standpoint, and then we'll start getting into some of the discussions. So maybe we'll start with Tintin.
So I'm a security researcher with Consensus Diligence, doing security audits there, but I'm also known to be the tools guy. So I really like to automate recurring tasks. That's why probably some people know me or have seen my profile picture somewhere, because I'm also the guy behind one of the VS Code extensions that are used by some of the auditors. Luckily also by developers. The main idea behind it was basically helping me to audit smart contracts more efficiently, because I'd like to have security augmentation for smart contracts, for source code, directly built into the IDE, which is something I think should be done anyway for most of the languages, so that you can avoid the usual pitfalls already. So it should alert you, or it should be obvious, for example, that a function is external, and you can easily see that once you're looking at the source code and stuff like that. So tackling security very early in the development lifecycle already, but the extension is also super useful if you are an auditor or someone who's new to a source code and you have to quickly understand what's going on. So it will allow you to graph things and find the main components. My background is in traditional information security. I've been doing a lot of vulnerability research, exploit development, stuff like that, doing disclosing vulnerabilities in open source software and also closed source software. And basically that's what I now also do in the blockchain space. And I hope that most of the things that I do are actually useful to you guys as well.
I'm Yannis Maragdakis. I'm from DDoB. We have co-founded DDoB with Neville, who's sitting over there. We are a security company, so we're doing the standard manual audits. We also provide tooling. We have contractlibrary.com that we've been running for the past 4 years, since 2018, as well as several program analysis. So we have participated in several vulnerability disclosures, including several efforts in war rooms, white hat hacking for many clients. So we've had significant security expertise in this space. But the publicly available tool that we have is contractlibrary.com, which is primarily a decompiler from deployed bytecode to a higher level representation, together with State Explorer for the current storage or balances of contracts.
Hey, I'm Christoph. I'm an independent auditor. I do independent audits, of course, but I also work a lot for these decentralized security DAOs that pop up right now, and are also sponsored today, like for Code Arena, where I'm currently #1, and also for Spearbit, where I'm an auditor. And yeah, I've basically been doing audits now pretty much every week for the past 1.5 years. And it's tough, but it's still interesting. But yeah, that's how it goes. And sometimes I also write some blog posts. You might have read one of those about like technical write-ups about vulnerabilities, or like how to become an auditor, or some general auditor lifestyle blog posts. Yeah.
Yep. My name is Anton. I'm from Chain Security. I think there was before Matthias on another panel. We are a security company that specializes on smart contract security. Similar to Yanis and DDoP, we are doing tooling. Like most of our team has some formal verification background, and we also quite famous for finding bugs in Ethereum Foundation bug bounty programs. Like we had one bug in the gas node that delayed Constantinople hard fork. This is one we kind of famous for. And yeah, I'm myself an engineer who does audits and tooling kind of at the same time, because it's quite useful to have actual hands-on experience knowing what bugs you need to find to write the tools that can automate this process.
Hey everyone, I'm Modit. I'm the CISO at Polygon. So I head both corporate security and blockchain security there. Polygon, as you may already know, is working on scaling Ethereum. So we have 3 ZK rollups coming up, 1 ZK plus optimistic rollup, 1 data availability layer coming up, an SDK, blockchain SDK coming up, and probably a couple other solutions also coming up. So doing a bunch. With me personally, I come from a traditional security background. So I was doing pen testing, web application security about a decade ago, got into blockchains through Monero, came for privacy, stayed for blockchains, and yeah, I've gathered expertise in both like traditional security and blockchain security over time.
Well, that was a fast round of introductions than I'd expected. But I'll go with what Gonzalo suggested in the previous panel, right? He's like, let's spice it up, right? So let's start with the fun thing. And Yanis was suggesting the same as well. Let's just go, into the hard, deep, not so easy questions and answers. But just to keep it fun, to set the context. SAFU or RECT? Or if you don't like those terms, WAGMI or NGMI. So let's start with that. That sets the tone, and then maybe we'll spice it up with audience questions.
Okay, I think we are all wrecked, basically. From an auditor's perspective, if I look at code, the chance of finding something is super high. And there's lots of opportunities, especially for newcomers, to do this as well. So if you're from the information security space and want to go into the blockchain space, there's a couple of things you need to know. And then you can get started already, basically, if you understand that the environment that you're working in is completely different. And once you understand that environment, you can actually find live vulnerabilities super easily. The big problem that we have is that there's a lot of value. Well, it's artificial value to some extent, but there's a lot of value locked in a lot of contracts that are unmonitored and can easily be exploited. And in a lot of cases, the exploit might even stay undetected for a couple of times. So that's why I feel like currently we are wrecked, but we are probably in a good way, on a good track to fix that with like more people coming in and our processes getting more mature, and also the tools. And one part to this is, and that's what I try in most of my cases, is to open source whatever tools I have, so that we can speed up the race between security and developers creating even new, more complex solutions.
I can argue both sides. I mean, definitely, we shouldn't be happy with the security state of the world. We are wrecked in many ways. It is easy to find vulnerabilities. At the same time, I think one of the previous speakers had said that today, this is a space where the development standards are pretty high. People do care about security. People do care about good development. So in a way, we're not in a very bad spot. The other thing that I have to say in praise of the space is that the role of auditors, at least as I've seen it, is a lot better than in traditional software consulting. I always had the idea that software consulting would be, I'm the enemy of the developer. I've been auditing almost every week for the past couple of years, like you've said, and my impression is exactly the opposite. People are extremely grateful. People thank me very, very much after every audit. I learned so much, etc. So we are very much a helper of the developer, and people acknowledge this quite a bit. So I do see lots of good cultural traits and lots of good practices. Now, software is very hard. There will always be vulnerabilities. So we are wrecked in principle, but there are good news too.
Yeah, I kind of agree with this. Like, when I still think we're wrecked, but it's getting slowly better. Like, if I look at the vulnerabilities that I saw 1 year ago in audits, and if I look at the state of the code I see nowadays, it's a lot better already. Like, it's like a year ago, we still saw vulnerabilities like missing access modifiers or reinitializable contracts, but I don't see this much in audits anymore. We sometimes still see this, like, interestingly in deployed code, like this burn function that anyone can call. We still see that, but interestingly, I don't see this in audits anymore. And I think the main reason is that the protocols that want to get an audit, they already have like this security mindset, and there's a general security mindset among these developers. And so if they prepare for an audit, they already catch all these low-hanging fruits. And at the same time, if like tools that catch these low-hanging fruits, like missing access modifiers for burn functions and reinitializable contracts and stuff like this. So yeah, the issues I see nowadays in audits are like the code is generally better. I still have this feeling. So yeah, I think we are on a good way to slowly go there, but there will always be like more issues because the cards are kind of stacked against the auditors, right? You need to find every single vulnerability, and the black hat only needs to find a single one. So yeah, it's the cards are in favor of black hats, so we're still wrecked, but it's at least it's slowly getting better, is my feeling. Yeah.
It was an either or, right? It was one, but all of you are like standing on both sides. So
Yeah, I'll support the rect position as well. And yeah, how previously you mentioned, like, developers became better, right? But hackers became better as well. So like, this is the nature of blockchains that also special to crypto, where on a traditional Web 2, so to say, software, it's not that easy to actually monetize the hacks. Like, you can easily go do some pen testing of the websites of smaller companies and to get there into the databases. But what do you do with it afterwards, right? The best you can do is try to sell it afterwards on some black market, right? But it's a really long process. It's not guaranteed you will get outcome, right? While on a blockchain, there is a really strong incentive for hackers to hack everything just because they immediately getting the reward. That's why I believe that's the progress we have with improved code, right? It could be not enough just because incentivize more value we will put inside on a blockchain, right? That's what we all probably want to do, right? More will be the incentive for hackers to do, and I'm not sure we'll be even able to fully outperform the hacker incentive. That's correct.
I'll pick one from both. So I'll say we are wrecked right now, but we are gonna make it. The reason is, like, traditionally, even security and safety have always lagged behind technology. The first products are always insecure. The first cars, the first airplanes, everything, like new tech is always unsafe. Then the security practices catch up. Same will happen with blockchain, has already started happening. If you look at the average code quality from, let's say, the 2017 era, the ICO era, and right now, there's a very big difference already, and it's improving. So in the general terms, I think security will keep lagging behind. It will keep improving, but I don't think it's realistic that we'll catch up to a moment where we can say, hey, security has perfect parity with code, and like all known issues are known. All issues are known. There would always be unknown unknowns. What we can change as a team is, like, put security at priority. 99% of the DeFi projects, blockchain projects I've worked with, look at security as an afterthought. So they'll just create the whole protocol and then send it out to the audit and just pass on the rest to the auditors, which is the wrong way to look at it. I think security mindset should be there since day zero. When the product is being architectured, you need someone with a security background, security mindset to actually help you architecture the product, actually build it out throughout the life cycle. And the audit should really be just nothing more than something you like a requirement or something you just do to get a stamp in some sense, like although people still get it for just a stamp, but eventually like audits should be at a point where even the best people are not able to find bugs in your code. If you send out code and it has a bunch of bugs, not only it shows lack of preparedness, but also speaking as like an auditor, if a code base I see has, and if I find 10 bugs on it already, there is much higher chance for me to miss a bug which is present there, just because like when you're busy with 10 bugs, you can miss other things very easily. But if I see a code base where I've not found a single bug yet, then I can be a lot more certain that there is none, because I've tried a lot of like almost all attack vectors. I've not wasted times on other bugs. So yeah, like we are wrecked right now, but over time these practices hopefully will change and we are all gonna make it.
All right.
I'm the opposite, by the way. I'm exactly the opposite.
So SAFU, but NGMI? Yeah.
No, but if I see a code base and I cannot find a single bug, I can't sleep at night because it means I don't understand it too well. If I've found 10 bugs already, I know that there's a high likelihood there's an 11th, but at least I feel I got enough to attack it. So I feel a lot more comfortable. Also, I feel a little relieved because nobody can blame me. I already found 10. So I mean, I'm kind of joking, but I'm saying there could be also the opposite mentality.
Absolutely.
Many times.
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, just wanted to start off on a fun note. So it's not like we are making light of the situation, vulnerabilities and exploits. I mean, that, like I said, this is the reason we are all here, to make things safer. In this case, Ethereum safer, right? So this sort of sets the tone, right? If I can take the average or the consensus, it's we are wrecked in the short term, but we are going to make it hopefully in the longer term. That could be 6 months, year or so, we'll see. So that is the summary. And let's sort of switch things around. We did not have time for the audience questions in some of the panels. I mean, we can talk about these things for like days. We've agreed upon some topics and discussions, but let's go and let's see if the audience has, I'm sure they have many questions on these topics.
Get us to fight with each other. Ask the right questions.
All right. Would you mind coming closer or? While that's happening in the audience, right? All of us are security professionals. How many think we are SAFU at this point? Safe. We're good enough. Everything is secure. All right. So yes.
Not a single one.
I think we have no one here works outside of security, so that's confirmed. Yes, please.
Yeah, hi, Kirk. The question is, do you think that 4 bytes is enough for a function signature? Are you worried about now that there's a lot more contracts coming out, that there's going to be a lot of overlap between function signatures?
Can answer that a little. So I don't think that would be a big problem because of 2 reasons. One, it's just a solidity feature. We can change it anytime we want. And secondly, it doesn't really do anything. It's only meant to direct the call to the right place in the smart contract. It was not meant to, and it should not be used to detect what a function is actually called. Because the reason is, even if you are able to decode it properly and you can see the function is called mint, it might actually be burning your tokens. So it's not a good security tool, should not be looked at it. And in that sense, like, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I will echo that. I mean, it's not that there cannot be attacks based on that, but it's rare anyway, because you don't really trust the signature ever. You trust the recipient. And in that sense, why does it matter so much? And it's 4 bytes in the contract, right? So if you trust the contract, accidental collisions will never happen. And if you do it on purpose, then you could have 8 bytes and someone would do it on purpose. They would find it. Well, okay, of course, if you go to 20, they will not find collisions, but what kind of attack does this prevent? I think it's a less significant attack vector than people might think.
All right. Christoph, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would agree with this. Like, I don't think if there's an issue with it, it always depends on another issue. So it won't be an issue by itself. And because if you compile the contract, you should be able to detect if there are any collisions like this. And otherwise, maybe you want to give certain access roles to some function signatures, but then it would only be an exploit if you trust arbitrary contracts then as well with this function signature. So by itself, I've never seen it as an issue.
I guess the only issue is like when someone's calling like a flash loan on token receive or any of like the ERC 777s that make token receive is if they happen to overlap with something else because you're not trusting the receiver address.
Yeah.
There's kind of like with flash loans, there's a general problem in some implementations that you usually have to authenticate where they're coming from. And not all the pools where you can lend like tokens from, they actually send you the original sender of like who called that flash loan in that case. So if you're programmatically calling a flash loan, you always have to verify if it's one of your trusted contracts who was actually calling this so that you can trust the data that is there. And currently in the documentations that we have and everything, there's one like super important part missing, and this is that you have to basically track how you requested that flash loan with what arbitrary data more or less that you are then decoding and using in your system. And there's some systems out there where you can actually, as a third party, initiate a flash loan, provide any data which will decode to something is valid and will be super vulnerable. So there's more issues to that. In the context of like function signatures, I see like they are mostly context sensitive, so they are mainly used within that contract or that system you're in. So you should, like in the contract, the compiler will help you, and with the system, there's maybe some extra steps that you would take that should be fine.
This just reminds me of one minor gas optimization you can make. In fact, you can go 2 bytes and save some gas because in EVM, the cost for when you do a transaction, you pay more for passing data which is non-zero versus 0 data. So if you brute force functions such that all of your functions end in like just 2 bytes and then 4 zeros, all of your callees would save little bit of gas.
Can I add to that? As a security auditor, one thing that we don't often want to hear is that you're optimizing for gas, especially for these kind of things, because they very often have side effects.
So like I said, we can go on and on. Just on a 4-byte function selector, we can have a whole panel, right? So we went all the way from talking about SAFU or rect and WAGMI deep down. So great question. Any other questions? Otherwise, we have a whole lot of things that we have planned to discuss and bring out so many of the things that you guys are interested. All right, so let's maybe wait for the questions. And one of the themes that came about, right, in all your introductions was Web 2 versus Web 3, right? Like Mudit said, we are very early in the space. We think, well, we've been working for several years into this, but if we zoom out, right, the whole protocol is not more than 7 years old. You look at the tooling, you look at the languages, right? You look at the contracts, look at the billion-dollar protocols that did not exist a few months ago, few years, right? So Web 2 versus Web 3, so many of you have worked in both spaces. Does it make a difference? No?
Makes a huge difference. So I'll counter an opinion that I heard in a previous panel. So in a previous panel, one of the speakers said, there are so many companies in the traditional IT space that have much more at stake relative to security. Self-driving cars, Apple. Tell me what damages Apple or Tesla have paid because of security vulnerabilities. I mean, it's become a legal liability for them, and they have good lawyers. So in the future, maybe. But right now, this is the space where you can lose a couple $100 million instantly if you get hacked. No other space. That's why we get these bounties. It's not random. We get these bounties of multi-millions because the threat is very immediate. In other spaces, the bounties are like, a good bounty is 50K. Here we have, like on Immunify right now, there are 2 bounties for 10 million. I mean, obviously these are aberrations, but like even $1 million or a couple of million, there have been many awarded at that level. This space, security is critical because the threat is so immediate. So that's a huge, huge, huge difference. And now, if I want to gripe to follow up on that, the difference in this space is that the security tooling is priced extremely low. Everybody expects everything for free. Like a traditional enterprise writing Java or C++, they're perfectly happy to buy a business license for 100K from Veracode or Coverity or whoever. In this space, people are spending like 30 to 60K a month, like big protocols for audits, but for tooling, they don't want to spend 100K a year. Even though the bounties are very high, the tooling has not been priced as high as the security implications would suggest yet. I think that's going to happen in the next couple of years.
A great segue to the next question. Why is that? Because I think the tooling, many of us have worked in the Web 2 space, right? So if you look at the security tooling, the companies that are built in the Web 2 traditional internet security space, they haven't gone for billions of dollars in valuation and so on, right? So we do see that carry over to the space, but I do agree with sort of the other things that you mentioned in terms of the value locked and the bounties and the exploits that happen. So what else? I mean, I think Anton wants to chime in as well.
I think I have one opinion that I can share. That's it's really easy to start in Ethereum, or especially like it takes 2 people or even 1 person with a good idea to quickly hack a Solidity smart contract and say that this is the next big thing, and it can really be the next big thing, right? But quite often when you becoming bigger as a company or as a protocol, you need to think not about growth, but you need to think about not losing everything you have. And so far, people and protocols, they become bigger, but I believe why they're not investing that much in security and tooling, it's just because they are keeping this move fast, break things mentality that they started with when they had kind of nothing to lose. And this problem that kind of security, like audits are super expensive. This is another problem just because of a lower supply, right? But the problem is that companies don't invest in their like security as a internal process. They don't have QA assurance. They don't have that good. I mean, some have like Polygon, right? So this is an example of that other protocols I believe can follow. But in many places they have dev teams, they have front-end team, but the security is always kind of outsourced by auditors. And I believe this is a kind of just mentality that you can pay for security to someone, and it's not something that you need to do. And you expect, of course, all tooling to be open source. Yeah.
Great point. I mean,
by the way, just to clarify, I'm not saying the average protocol or company in this space doesn't pay much for security. It pays a lot more than the traditional space. I'm saying it pays it in different ways, in auditing and in bounties, not in tools. That's probably because of the size of development teams. When you have, like you said, Anton said, like 5, 10 developers is a big protocol versus traditional development could be hundreds for a Java shop or something.
Yeah, I also meant that like they need to pay for their internal security and not to auditors. Sort of.
We can again go on, but before we keep sort of pointing fingers, is there any protocol in the audience that wants to counter as to why they're not paying for certain tools or the audits or services so that this can be more interactive? Or is this a room full of security professionals who all believe the same thing? It's truly an echo chamber. I don't think any of them would say. If there was, You feel free to tweet it out and we'll take the question from there as well.
Can I add on that? Like, there's one thing that I, as an auditor, always think about, and this is like, will we ever come to a place where security tools replace auditors? And I can't see this because mainly, like at diligence, for example, the main issues that we nowadays find is logic issues. So we really try to get a deep understanding of what you're trying to build, and we often even find issues in your specifications if you have them, because most of the teams don't have them either. So the problem is starting way earlier, and that's why I often refer to this epoch that we are in right now in like a startup epoch in the crypto space. So most of the teams that we have, there's like a 3-developer team that is basically running a multi-million-dollar smart contract system. This is something that you don't usually see outside in the traditional world, where someone has to buy AWS storage services, whatever, and have people managing this, and maybe is forced to introduce secure software development life cycles because your investors actually want you to do this, because otherwise the investments might be gone and stuff like this. So this is what I don't often see. I see it in particular in some bigger protocols, that they're already trying to implement this, and some even have super nice processes already that get security into the development phase very early, as Moody also mentioned before. I hope that at some point we will arrive at, for example, auditors being embedded into protocols early, or developers being trained for security things as well. But my ultimate hope is that at some point we will arrive at a smart contract language that makes it way easier for us to write secure code. It should be super obvious for you if you're actually using potentially insecure programming paradigms.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that would help much, because it's the same issue with the tooling. I think it's not a problem of the way they write code, but it's usually logical issues or even attack vectors they didn't think about, like flash loans or stuff like this from external things. So I don't think designing a language would help here. So I also think that auditing is still going to be mostly a manual process. I agree with this. But then again, I'm not sure how much AI or ML is going to do in the future. If you look at GPT-3 nowadays, it's impressive. So I don't know, maybe it's still possible that auditing can be automated to large parts, but I'm skeptical for now.
I was told that a good panel is when people don't start fighting, but at least disagree a lot. So would anyone want to counter? I mean, we have tooling, Web 2, Web 3, paying for two. There's so many, none of this is sort of very clear cut, right? We are not discussing nuances, but what do you guys think? On this tooling aspect, or?
I can do some bits. On the tooling aspect, I don't disagree. I agree. This is the first thing I said. For most projects here, the security bit is aftermath. So they don't spend anything while the product is being developed. They just spend it on an audit after it. And that's mainly a problem of education among especially the management folks. This is not how the security industry works. I think every major project really needs someone with security background who can change this. This is what I'm doing for Polygon. I've set aside a decent sized budget for our security tooling and stuff like that. The thing I can disagree on is the language bit. So making language secure, I think Solidity is doing fine. Obviously, you can add more checks to it, but I think that those just come to, I don't know, they are not super nice. I think these security checks should be in a static analyzer. Slither, Methods, and these things, they are more well suited to detecting certain bad paradigms and recommending issues versus if you just add it to a language, then it becomes more of a hurdle. People will start using assembly to do things, and it just backfires, in my opinion.
I'm gonna disagree with tooling part of previous speakers.
This is a good panel.
Yeah. This is just sort of expectation of people who use tools. It should be really low effort, like you point it to the smart contract and gives you all the bugs, right? And that's why it kind of misses the bugs that come from business logic, right? But like Certora has a formal verification tool, right? That's basically comes along with the formal specifications where you can specify business logic in some language, and then it's basically automated process afterwards, right? And in quite often, I mean, especially if you look at some more complex contracts like, I don't know, Uniswap V3, right? It's really easy to come up to with specifications. That's the swap should happen according to certain rules, right? But it's super hard to actually go through all these crazy functions that that do the switches between ticks. This is a good example where tools can be much better than the human, and I believe like. The complexity of projects will only grow with more complex math, more complex functions, and we will need tools eventually. And tools is not something that just spits out your output. It's something where you need to interact with, learn how to use it, and I believe it will be in the end somewhat a synergy between you and a tool. Yeah.
We have seen. Yanis, you want to write it?
Very much, although I am a big proponent of advanced tools, I would very much agree that tools will not supplant the human auditor. At the same time, I'm old enough to remember when I was taught in my graduate AI classes why humans will always beat computers at chess, and then if not at chess, then at Go for sure. And this was taught at a top 10 US university by a neural networks top researcher in the world. So it's not like some old AI guy. So if you go a little bit back, lots of those predictions can prove completely wrong. So I don't want to predict the future. That's notoriously hard. Right now, I would say yes. I would never say that tools can replace an auditor. I can actually, on the topic of languages, I will kind of disagree, agree, whatever, that a language would be a good step forward to some extent. Languages are not solving the fundamental problem. You know, there's that old quote, the determined programmer can write Fortran in any language. You want an example? I'll go outside the Ethereum space, even though this is an Ethereum conference. We did an audit for a project on the Zilliqa blockchain recently. They have a language that prevents reentrancy because the external call takes place after all the effects of the contract. You know what's the first thing that the Zilliqa counterpart of ERC20 tokens does? Every time you transfer, it gives you a callback. So you actually have reentrancy again. The language prevents it, but the protocol on top of the language re-enables it because every time you transfer tokens, it calls back another function in the original contract. So you could very well have effects after external calls. So languages, you know, you can design them with the best of intentions, but in the end, people need to know what they're protecting against.
Absolutely. So yeah, there's another saying that says, if a layer gets smart, the layer on top of you gets smarter, right? So, but tooling, right? I think we've had a lot of discussion in the audit previous panel as well, and here, but we need to put things in perspective, right? We are using the word tooling to really put the whole spectrum into one bucket. There is tooling that comes at the specification, like the shift left, the prover, scribble, different parts of the spectrum, right? So tooling can be applied there. I mean, it's assisting the people, the humans who are doing whatever they're doing at that part of the stage, right? And we're also combining things like we have the VS Code, editor, right? That's going to actually help people during the development as well as an audit. And then we're also talking about automated testing, which really happens at the end of the life cycle, right? So we're really putting all these things in the same box, which is not fair because that's sort of to keep it fun, saying, hey, tooling, do you believe it or not? Humans, AI. But I think that should be put in perspective as well. It really is in a spectrum and we should think of it that way. I was actually going to sort of ask you to bring out your crystal balls and predict the future, but we already did that in the beginning, and we saw that I think Rect was sort of the consensus.
There's going to be an ecosystem level vulnerability. Geth will be compromised, and we'll be fighting over whether the hacker should get all the Ethereum and all of Ether in the world, whatever. I don't know.
No,
what do you want me to predict? There are threats everywhere, right?
Let's not predict right?
anything.
Exactly.
There are
let's
very
not
serious
predict,
threats
but
at every level.
What do you think is a doomsday scenario? What's the worst thing that can go wrong? Yanis has
my paranoia.
Yeah.
My paranoia is that after the merge, that actually the stakers will be overcome by greed. They will accept some kind of MEV-like arrangement where everyone individually thinks that they are bribed to do something completely innocuous, and some clever attacker will actually bribe enough stakers and they will take over the network. My doomsday scenario is that human greed will prevail in an otherwise decentralized setting. That's my nightmare.
All right. Anyone else want to take a shot at it?
Yeah, on that, I can add, I don't think, for me, the more dangerous scenario is the risk of these centralized stablecoins for two reasons. One is if a single government entity orders them to basically support their fork of Ethereum, which has KYC mandatory and whatnot, they would be forced to do it. And if that happens, the DeFi ecosystem would basically collapse on the original Ethereum, just because all of the major stablecoins, USDT, USDC, are directly centralized. DAI depends on USDC. MIM also depends a little on USDC. So basically all of DeFi ecosystem would start collapsing, which would really not be nice, because we will still have purists on this chain, but I fear this might become the ETH classic chain, which exists, but it doesn't exist. And we'll suddenly have a move to the KYC chain. And the other fear is more even if let's say the US entity does not order something, but maybe the North Korean hackers get into Circle's address or whatnot, end up minting a bunch of USDC or a bunch of USDT. That can also wreck DeFi. If you have enough USDC, you can empty Compound, you can empty Aave, you can empty anything that uses DAI. You can basically take money from all of the DeFi protocols. These are my doomsday scenarios.
Yeah, we all agree with those. Yeah, those are good.
I would also extend probably
yes, we do have time. But keep the scenario, just the title or maybe just the introductory, because it can... there are so many doomsday scenarios that we can come up with.
Yeah, I would say it's not only a problem with centralized stablecoins. I think any stablecoin losing a peg is a huge problem. Even if you say algorithmic stablecoins like DAI, they have certain assumption about speed of price changes, because it could be that your liquidations won't keep up. So it's a real problem that losing stablecoins, losing the peg is a problem.
Okay. So incentives at a base layer, we have policy affecting stablecoins, contagion risk. Anything else you can add on, Christoph and Tintin?
Yeah, I can talk about...
That's not doomsday enough.
I'd like to talk about something more high level, about Web3 values. And because right now the Ethereum culture is really nice, and there's all these contracts are open source. But if you look at Solana or other chains, a lot of this code is closed source, and it could be doomsday scenario if suddenly these values win, because they keep the code closed source because it's apparently harder to hack closed source code. And it's true, you need to put more reverse engineering effort into it. But I think a doomsday scenario is if this gets more popular on other chains, like keeping your code closed source. I don't think that's anything anyone wants who got early into Web3. Yeah.
We start using contractlibrary.com. Please.
I think we already have a good idea of proper nightmares right now. There's a couple more vectors to it, even like off-chain components being compromised, supply chain attacks, things going undetected, and at some point, like someone doing things on your behalf, or nodes being remotely controlled, and you can't fix it right now. So there's a lot of things that can happen at some point. I think especially everything that is not smart contract directly is often very overlooked, and we should also spend or give this like more focus and check whether our underlayer that we built on is actually secure, which is not often the case. And there's more vectors to it. Like we can talk about this, I guess, all night, right? Even with some centralized components, closed source applications where you actually don't know what's really happening behind that. So. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we can come up with nightmares, all night long. Cryptography, threats, whatever. But fundamentally, in the end, it all comes down to people, and I think we can recover from most anything. But yeah, these are pretty realistic threats. Like stable coins are perhaps an underappreciated threat in this space.
I think we have covered pretty much all the buckets, right? So we have covered policy as a nightmare scenario, stable coins and the contagion risk. We've covered the sort of the ethos in that space of closed versus open. We have covered, base layer and the effects that we can have. And then in your case, again, it's not everything about the smart contracts. There's just so much. We have phishing emails that, I forget, was it yesterday or day before? I mean, it happens. So this all the risk from the Web2 space is carried over, and we have more on, with smart contracts. So there's a whole lot. So if we have not covered anything, we maybe have time for one question? Anything that people want to add or ask? All right, Pablo?
I'm going to repeat the question. It's like, what's our, just for the stream, attack on nation state? Nation states join the attacks, right? I guess that's
North
what a
Korea.
bit. Yeah, and it was covered on the previous panel. That North Korea is already in the game. So, yeah, that's exactly going to be much more hackers, which have. It's going to be harder for us. That's all.
We have 10 seconds, and then we have to go to the next session.
Like an open question, do we actually know what nation states are not in the current tech that we are already using? This is kind of like an open-ended question for you guys.
All right, we'll leave you all with that question. I'm sure we have many answers. But thank you all for this wonderful session. I think we agreed on a lot of things and maybe disagreed as well.